to speak to them anymore, so we barely talk. I lived my days in peace in the new house, a small home where I was supposed to restart with David and face the grief of losing him. With substantial savings from the sale, the plan to build our own home vanished. Without David returning to work, I immersed myself in the few memories I had with David and slowly began to look forward to a positive future. Meanwhile, my in-laws, especially Emily, must have been accumulating unresolved grievances. I didn't want any more involvement with them, so I didn't inform them of my new residence. Unable to interact with me, Emily's frustration only grew. He had always pretended in front of David, and now couldn't turn to Michael, whom she didn't get along with. Not knowing my whereabouts added to her stress, which kept piling up until Emily lost her balance. One night, Emily committed a heinous act by pouring gasoline around this old house. Fortunately, a passing neighbor, sensing something amiss, apprehended her before anything worse could happen. After being reported to the police and found with the old paper and a lighter, Emily was arrested for attempted arson. The new occupants, furious upon learning she was the woman who had intruded on moving day, angrily insisted on pressing charges. Contacting me as well, I apologized profusely, but it was for the terrifying experience they almost had, not for Emily's attempted arson. In the end, Emily couldn't escape legal action due to her obsession with the house. I managed to be forgiven after repeated apologies, promising such an incident would never happen again. Emily, who had grown up in luxury and always had whatever she wanted, became frustrated when she couldn't have the house. This unfulfilled desire turned into distorted jealousy, and unable to let go of the house and land, she resorted to crime and eventually ended up in prison. Brian, you should have been her support, and their marriage ended in dispute following her arrest. So, when her sentence was over, Emily had no home to return to, but that was the outcome of her own actions. Michael, lonely after losing David, said, "Susan, having you makes it bearable." My relationship with my in-laws was severed, but I hadn't lost my entire family. For David, who I believed was watching over me from heaven, I resolved to live peacefully. Don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed this video, and if you're curious to see where this journey takes us next, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss a single update. Your support is what keeps this channel alive and kicking, and every like, comment, and share means the world to us. We've got plenty more stories, insights, and surprises coming your way, so stay tuned for the next video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Suggested was to sell the land early. I agreed with Michael's suggestion and decided to proceed with the sale. Even though it was a valuable inheritance from my grandfather, I didn't want it to become an obstacle for us. Rather, because it was important, I didn't want to leave any troubles. Of course, it wasn't a decision made on my own. I discussed it with David while he was alive, and he had his agreement at that time. David learned about all his parents' actions. Though I didn't want to tell him, I couldn't complete the sale alone, but David understood why I couldn't consult him and condemned his parents' actions. I'm sorry I didn't notice. If it's okay with you, Susan, let's finish the sale before my parents make a move. It's a shame about the house inherited from grandfather-in-law. No, it's okay. If it's going to cause trouble, grandfather would agree to let it go too. I decided to sell the land, not to protect my relationship with my in-laws, but to safeguard the future I had with David. Michael, a real estate expert, exerted his efforts in the sale, finding the ideal buyers. My task was to find a new place to move as soon as possible, and that naturally to prevent my in-laws from finding out. The house, while lived in, was almost like new, so we were able to keep the price reasonable. A buyer was quickly found, and the sale was swiftly concluded. They were the family that had just arrived. Originally, I had planned to wait in our new home for David's return. David was pleased about the sale, so it was only regrettable he wasn't here. The movers efficiently transported the furniture, and the evicted in-laws watched from a distance as the move continued smoothly. They stick around for a while, but that couldn't last forever. The movers they had hired, angry and confused, demanded an explanation. "I can't believe this is happening. It's a breach of contract," questioned my in-laws, who, in their panic, struggled to explain. Eventually, the household goods had to be taken back, but because of the unexpected situation, a significant surcharge was apparently billed. Emily, finally understanding the situation, called to me, trembling, "This is the wife of David's house, so it's our home too, right? The situation is odd, isn't it?" She tried to persuade me with her strained excuses, but I ignored them and left with only my hand luggage. The land was already the new family's property, not mine anymore, so I had nothing to answer. David's memorial service proceeded without delay. I encountered my in-laws there, but even though they seemed like they wanted to say something about the house, they never did and eventually left surreptitiously. I had no obligation, often left the store first, leaving me no choice but to pay. There was never a thank you or a promise to pay me back later. Sure, I have a house and a good salary, so savings weren't an issue, but David and I had always been frugal. So, Emily's extravagance felt odd. Even when both in-laws were there, it was the same. In fact, with Brian, my financial burden only increased. I knew I had to address it, but it was hard to discuss with David. David had said, "I'll definitely come home on the long weekends," but his new office was busy, and he rarely managed to return. "Mom says you've been going out every week. Are you managing okay? It doesn't seem like there's anything to worry about." David's video call showed his tired eyes and thinner cheeks. His work fatigue was evident. Feeling guilty about bringing up the issue with Emily, I ended up being overly optimistic. "Emily's been really good to me. Take care of yourself, David." "I'm fine, don't worry." While I downplayed it to David, I couldn't refuse to pay for outings with my in-laws. Their behavior escalated until one day when I said, "I can't go out today." Emily said something unexpected. "Then can you lend me some money?" "Hey, for you, just a little." "Really, I've already made a reservation at a restaurant. I'll take another friend instead, so could you cover what I'm short?" I wanted to refuse, but that would have made things worse. Resigned, I opened my wallet, but Emily never acted this way in front of David. "Have you thought about asking David?" When I hinted this to Emily, "That's shameful," she told David. Her response shocked me. It was clear she felt it was okay to ask me, not David. I gave up on Emily as her demands for money became routine. At least giving her some pocket money, she stopped dragging me out. I knew it was a big problem, but my attempts to communicate with Emily were exhausting. Her behavior became more bizarre. She'd show up unannounced, inspecting the inside and outside of the house, making me feel like my privacy was invaded. "Is this from your grandfather, Susan? This furniture, it's wonderful. You can afford such luxury." Some furniture were antiques my grandfather liked. Emily seemed to enjoy them, admiring them as if they were her own. "This is mine and David's home." I finally started to consider confiding about Emily's actions to David. David might be surprised, but how I wish we could find a way to deal with Emily together. Emily's actions are far from pleasant. Even as in-laws, it's an invasion of privacy. However, around the same time, the duration of David's assignment was determined. Just a little longer to bear it, and when David returns, the in-laws asking for money would likely end. A glimmer of hope sprouted in my heart. David was working hard every day, so I just needed to be patient a little longer. But as I eagerly awaited David's return, things took an unexpected turn. "What? David collapsed and he's in the hospital?" I was stunned. The call came from a colleague at his new location. I hurried to the hospital. Perhaps due to overwork, David suddenly suffered a heart attack. The rush to the hospital by ambulance, it was too late. My kind, healthy David passed away from an unforeseen attack. I couldn't grasp the reality as I faced his funeral. I don't remember much, overwhelmed by grief. Michael rushed over, taking care of most things. I'm sorry, Michael. Even though you lost David too, you're helping so much. It's David's funeral, of course I should help. How about the land? Is the house ready? We talked about cleaning up after the funeral. I nodded and said, everything's perfect. In a few days after David's funeral, my in-laws came to the house. But it was clear they weren't there to console me. It's a shame about David, but we're here for you, don't worry. Emily's face had a strangely unpleasant smile. To my astonishment, she had arranged a truck, packed to the brim with furniture and belongings from our house. I was too shocked and confused to speak. This looked like a move. Emily and her husband were planning to move in without discussing it with me. Why were they doing this? But the answer was clear. Are you after my land? I voiced my concern amidst the confusion. Emily showed a cold smile. The land value has soared. We've been eyeing this house for a long time. In fact, Susan, thanks to this inheritance, you married David. We allowed the marriage because you inherited it. I was overwhelmed with despair, lost for words. Emily, you mean you're moving in with me? Excuse me, what nonsense are you talking about? I asked in confusion, and Emily got angry. David's death was unexpected, but even if it hadn't happened, Emily intended to take this house. My in-laws were trying to replace me as the landowner. They assumed I'd leave the house because David was gone. Now that David is gone, you'll go back to your parents, right? It'd be sad to leave this house empty, so we'll live here. That's why I'm telling you not to worry, Emily said, her smile twisted in distortion. While feeling fear, I pointed out Emily's mistake. But the house is already sold. I restrained my laughter at Emily's misunderstanding but couldn't hide my unpleasant smile. Emily, in turn, was just then a different moving company's truck arrived. Sorry, we're here to deliver to this house. A burly mover came down, speaking to us. Due to the confusion of another truck being present, Emily's movers also came down, realizing something was amiss. Due to the arrival of the other truck, they looked bewildered. Both in-laws were flustered and incoherent. Arguing with everyone wouldn't resolve anything. Seeing my in-laws in panic, I began to regain my composure. Then I promptly gave instructions to move the truck. This house has already been sold, and the contract finalized. The new family is moving in, so you can't bring their belongings into someone else's house, right? As the movers were astonished, a luxurious car pulled up. Out came a wealthy-looking couple and their children. In fact, the land was no longer mine, they were the new owners. My in-laws, increasingly confused, were unable to comprehend what was happening. Please move the truck quickly. The new occupants can't start their work. Somehow, I managed to get Emily's truck moved, and the movers immediately began their work.